Hello, and welcome once again to the Black Ponder. I'm Neil Trotter, and today we return back to the park. Now check it out. I got a new microphone for Christmas. It's like one of those, what they call them, lapel mics, those, not even sure. These are ones you clip on your shirt, right? Very popular mics. So hopefully those will do better with filtering out some of the background noise, because I know the park audio can be a bit crummy. So we'll see what happens. We'll see. We'll try it and we'll see what happens. This park that I'm at is actually right next to the Oakland International Airport. so we got a major international airport, airplanes flying overhead. So that's where a lot of the noise comes from. So hopefully it all works out well. Today, what we're going to be talking about is some feminism again, some feminist theory, and we're going to be doing that via this book. We're going to have a discussion about this book. It's called The Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer. This text was first published in 1970, and what the argument, the thesis, is that in today's modern society, the female gender, the female sex, is essentially castrated socially. All right, what does that mean? Well, what's the definition of a eunuch? Back in the old school days, during the feudal times, the feudal lord, the king, would have a servant who would look after his mistresses, his maidens, his daughters, and that servant would be castrated, penis removed essentially. And so that in that way the king would have no fear or no concern of the servant getting involved sexually with his female servants, right, or female partners. Many cultures did that back then. A lot of other eunuchs were religious leaders. They would be in charge of the religious ceremonies and the religious rituals, and they would be very high-ranking members of society. It's just that the idea, the concept was like, okay, remove the sexual drive by castration, and then they could just focus on the more important things. That was the idea anyway. Very cruel type of mentality, but for a long time that was going on back in the feudal times. But what this text is arguing, what Greer is arguing, is that we still do this today. We do this to the female gender. The socially accepted woman is a woman who has no sexual drive of her own. Her sexual drive is completely dedicated to the pleasuring that of a man and not her own self. And then in that effect, she's socially castrated. Let me explain. Let's go through some quotes and to get a better idea of this concept. The stereotype is the eternal feminine. She is a sexual object sought by all men and by all women. She is of neither sex, for she has herself no sex at all. Her value is solely attested by the demand she excites in others. All she must contribute is her existence. She need achieve nothing, for she is the reward of achievement. She need never give positive evidence of her moral character, because virtue is assumed from her loveliness and her passivity. If any man who has no right to her be found with her, she will not be punished, for she is morally neuter. The matter is solely one of male rivalry. Innocently, she may drive men to madness and war. The more trouble she can cause, the more her stocks go up. For possession of her means the more demand she excites. And so what Greer is talking about here is, in our society, the purpose of the woman is for the sexual drive of the man. That is the social purpose of the woman, and that's it. And in that way, her sex drive is not acknowledged. We shall continue. Listen to this. This is a good point too. She actually quotes from another text called "Soul on Ice," the allegory of the black eunuchs. The myth of the strong black woman is the other side of the coin of the myth of the beautiful dumb blonde. The white man turned the white woman into a weak-minded, weak-bodied, delicate freak, a sex pot, and placed her on a pedestal. He turned the black woman into a strong, self-reliant Amazon and deposited her in his kitchen. The white man turned himself into the omnipotent administrator and established himself in the front office. So Greer, she's trying to acknowledge that it's, even though socially we got the racial divide going on still, even though it's different, both the woman in general in our society is still castrated, just in different ways. But whether you're black or white, the woman is a eunuch. Her essential quality is castratedness. She absolutely must be young, her body hairless, her flesh buoyant, and she must not have a sexual organ. This is reminiscent to the idea of the virgin. The female virgin is the most desirable sex object in today's society. She's the ideal socially, the most acceptable form of the woman in today's society. How society is structured today, that castrated female, that female with no sex drive, that's essentially a virgin, or furthermore, a eunuch, is the most ideal version of a lady in today's society. Seeing that the world despoils itself for this creature's benefit, she must be happy. The entire structure would topple if she were not. So the image of woman appears plastered on every surface imaginable, smiling interminably. And we're talking about, like, for example, advertisement, billboards, sex sales where you got the product, whatever it may be, the latest tech object, the makeup, the fashion clothes. You always got the sexy lady in the front smiling, but that sexy lady is not only an objectified sex symbol, her own sexuality is completely disregarded. Like, it's not even about that. It's just about presenting herself as this social object that's ready to serve the pleasure of a patriarchal society. Listen to this quote right here. Indeed, if we were able to give a more definite connotation of the concept of masculine and feminine, it would also be possible to maintain that libido is invariably and necessarily of a masculine nature, whether it occurs in men or women, and irrespectively of whether its object is a man or a woman. So that was a quote from Freud. And a lot of what Greer is talking about is based off of Freudian psychology. And Freudian psychology is still deeply seated today in modern society. It's like very foundational. We consider the libido, the sex drive, to be very masculine, very male. And basically society that's what a huge part of society revolves around. This idea, this concept that libido, sex drive, is essentially male. Now, this is Greer herself talking. If we are to insist on the contingency of feminine characteristics as the product of conditioning, we will have to argue that the masculine-feminine polarity is actually enough but not necessary. We will have to reject the polarity of definite terms, which are always artificial, and strive for the freedom to move within indefinite terms. On these grounds, we must reject femininity as meaning without libido, and therefore incomplete subhuman and cultural reduction of human possibilities, and rely upon the indefinite term female, which retains the possibility of female libido. In order to understand how a female is castrated and becomes feminine, we must consider the pressures to which she is subjected from the cradle. So we're talking about the notion of this idea of, sex drive being inherently male. This promotion of men to be sexual, and then we drive this encouragement to be even hypersexual, right? And for women to be subdued, to be less sexual. And when a woman is more sexually active or more, their libido is she's more open with her libido, then she's outcast in society. Whereas when a man is more open with his libido, he's celebrated, right? Or if a man is not as sexual or not as open with his sex drive. He's then a outcast, right? Because, to be sexual is to be male. The whole idea, like, men think about sex, every something minutes. I remember the statistic, or like every 8 seconds or something like that, which is, a lot of people, I remember hearing that statistic a while back, and a lot of people consider that to be true. Like, men think about sex all the time. Well, some men do, but a lot of men don't, and a lot of women think about sex all the time, and a lot of women don't. But we have this false reality, this polarity that doesn't exist yet. We base society off of this, and essentially what happens is that we basically castrate the female gender, the female sex, and it holds us back as a species. As a human society, we're held back because the female gender is not allowed to express itself naturally in a truthful way. Let me further explain with another quote. Women are contoured by their conditioning to abandon autonomy and seek guidance. It ought to be the a priori evidence of the synthetic nature of our concept of womanhood that it is so often expounded. So what's she talking about here? Well, it's interesting that she uses the word or the term a priori, which is, a existential term popularized by Immanuel Kant, right? And it's talking about the thing of itself, the thing in and of itself, right? What is womanhood is what Greer is talking about here. What is womanhood? Well, in our society, really what womanhood is a loss of autonomy. It is a person who is not autonomous. That's womanhood in the social standard, in our society today. I mean, that's not what womanhood should be, right? But that's what womanhood is in society today. Society makes it so that if you're a woman, you are not autonomous, right? And if you are autonomous and you present yourself as a woman, then you're a social outcast. Then she says, the existence of the continual strain in the feminine situation cannot be concealed, so it must be explained. It's meaning that it's this false reality that we've constructed in our society that women do not have a libido. They have this sexual innocence, right? This false reality. It is constantly shown to be false, like all the time. And we see this, right? So it has to be reinforced at all times. And that's why you see this over hypersexualization in society. This huge implementation of sex and like promotion, right? In capitalism, in media. We're trying to reinforce this false reality that is obviously not true, but it has to be constantly knocked in our heads. That's why we're bombarded with all this sexual promotion that's built off of falsehood. Let me continue with this philosophical idea that Greer brings up. Love is not possible between inferior and superior because the base cannot free their love from selfish interests, either as the desire for security or social advantage. And being lesser, they themselves cannot comprehend the faculties in the superior, which are worthy of love. So again, Greer is basing a lot of her ideology off of Freudian psychology, it's true that a lot of our society today is based off of Freudian psychology. I would argue that much of what Freud thought was false, right? I don't really buy into the whole Oedipus complex. I mean, sure, like a child loves their mother, a son loves their mother if they're brought up lovingly by the mother, but the whole sexual attachment with the mother, I don't know about that. But we base our society off of this psychology, right? And basically what Greer is saying in this text is that the way we bring up children in our society using this whole Freudian psychology, it corrupts the concept of love, where love becomes more of a dynamic between the superior and the inferior. And in a way, it becomes more about the superior the dominant loving themselves, and that love being reflected from the subordination, the inferiority of the subordinate person that's being loved. So in that way, it's very narcissistic, right? Love is by nature narcissistic. This is what Greer is arguing, based off of the Freudian psychology that we built society off of, or all these social norms off of. Let me use this quote to explain further this idea. When Adam saw Eve in the Garden of Eden, he loved her because she was of himself, bone of his bone, and more like him than any of the other animals created for his delectation. His movement of desire towards her was an act of love for his own kind. So the Genesis story, right, which a lot of the social norms is based off of the love between Adam and Eve. Greer argues that love is really just Adam loving himself, because, the story goes, God took a rib from Adam and then from that created Eve. And so Adam really he sees himself in Eve, and that's why he loves Eve, right? It's not that he sees Eve as an autonomous person, as an agent of herself. The only reason why he loves her is that he sees himself in her. And in that way, love is narcissistic. And that love is expressed today like that. Female castration results in concentration of her feelings upon her male companion and her impotence in confrontations with her own kind. Women cannot love because, owing to a defect in narcissism, they do not rejoice in seeing their own kind. So what Greer is arguing is that because in this society, women aren't allowed autonomy because they're always in the service of a man. They can't love themselves, right? Because they can never see themselves. They can't have that narcissistic type of love expressed because they can't ever see themselves ever in the world. Based off of this whole Freudian psychology of love being you seeing a reflection of yourself in your lover, women don't have that opportunity. It's very interesting, this philosophical idea. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I see where she's going with this. I see how our society is structured, our social norms are structured based off of this type of concept. And I do see plenty of examples of love that are based off of this kind of ideology, this type of expression of love. In fact, the operation of female insecurity in undermining natural and proper narcissism is best summed up by their use of makeup and disguise, ruses of which women are infallibly aware. Those women who boast most fulsomely of their love for their own sex, apart from lesbians who must invest their own ideal of love, usually have curious relations with it, intimate to the most extraordinary degree, but disloyal, unreliable, and tension-ridden, however close and long-standing they may be. So the way women even express themselves, express their beauty, with makeup or fashion, they're trying to be somebody else. They're hiding who they are. They're even through that they're not allowed to love themselves truly as who they are. They have to make themselves up in the service of the male role. As both genders, both sexes built this false reality. They built this social construct that's based entirely off of falsehood. They hurt each other. Every wife who slaves to keep herself pretty, to cook her husband's favorite meals, to build up his pride and confidence in himself at the expense of his sense of reality, to be his closest and effectively his only friend, to encourage him to reject the consensus of opinion and find reassurance only in her arms, is binding her mate to her with hoops of steel that will strangle them both. Every time a woman makes herself laugh at her husband's often told jokes, she betrays him. The man who looks at his woman and says, "What would I do without you?" is already destroyed. His woman's victory is complete, but it is a pyrrhic. Both of them have sacrificed so much of what initially made them lovable to promote the symbiosis of mutual dependence that they scarcely make up one human being between them. And basically what Greer is saying is that the social constructs such as marriage, the institution of marriage, for instance, or just the traditional male-female relationship, is this play acting is just a destruction of truth or forsaking of who they actually are as individuals. The traits invented for him have been invented by women, cherishing the chains of their bondage. It is a male commonplace that women love riders, but in fact, women are hypnotized by the successful man who appears to master his fate, and they long to give their responsibility for themselves into the keeping of one who can administer it in their best interests. Such creatures do not exist, but very young women in the astigmatism of sexual fantasy are apt to recognize them where they do not exist. Opening car doors, maneuvering head waiters, choosing gifts, and earning money are often valued as romantic attainments. In search of romance, many women would gladly sacrifice their own moral judgment for their champion. And so, what we're seeing here is the sacrifice of autonomy by the woman to be accepted socially, and as a male to submit to this hypersexual role. He is giving up himself, his true sense of self as well. There's a lot to consider here. A lot of it I can understand where she's coming from, because we are looking at social constructs that do relate to how our society is structured today. And both genders do give up a lot of their true selves to maintain this social structure. I would encourage you to check it out. The Female Eunuch by Germaine Greer. Well, you've been listening to The Black Ponder. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.